behind me, and she wasn't driving. It was my car, her car. Through red lights, no cops. You go to Bayonne,
Bayonne
20 miles an hour, they're going to pull you over.
Bayonne, they'll take your car and confiscate it.
Right.
Because you spit out the window.
But we did a
ridiculous in
100-mile chase. Anyway, make a long story short, my leg is shaking,
Yeah.
and the gambler's
That's
leg.
the gambler's leg. My father used to watch 2 different TVs, and when I was growing up, and have games because this is when
I
he
still
took
do.
sports, and he'd have money, of course. That mattered. It wasn't just because he was a sports fan. He'd have one TV on one a game on one TV, and he'd have another game on another TV, and his legs would be shaking like this, and they'd say that's the gambler's leg because it was what would determine whether or not we didn't eat or went to what was the restaurant back then? Villa Capri. Villa Capri and Puccini's. It's
Or the
Puccini's
Cobra
now, I
on
think.
Wednesday.
Right? Yeah, and back then the
With a
lifestyle was.
$200 dress thrown in.
My mother had an elaborate wardrobe. She had all kinds of mink stoles. And in those days, like we talked about in the past, a lot of the payment or compensation that you received when people owed you money, if they had no cash, was things that, like, this would never happen now either. Like, they had land, which was our house in Tom's River. They had diamonds, furs, things like that. And people would say, well, I don't have money, but here's a fur coat.
That's true.
Or a mink stole.
I bought diamonds, they were what you call
We had a
hot
lot of diamonds that one time, I remember.
paid $500.
We had jewelry everywhere. My birthstone, my birthday is April, is diamond. So they gave me a diamond pendant, I remember.
That was a lot of money then,
Yeah.
$500. The ring, I had it built into what they call an empire,
Yes.
like a volcano.
Cocktail ring that she had.
It was worth
beautiful.
$5,000 when $5,000 could almost buy a house.
Which would be 30,000
Yeah.
now, at least.
I don't know what she did with it.
Well, she later on separated it and made it into a whole bunch of rings.
And I bought the diamonds from Joe, Dolly's boyfriend, with the one
really?
leg.
Who wound up being an
no
amputee
legs.
later.
I never saw a guy hop around from a wheelchair to a chair with no legs, but he used to do it.
Yeah.
But of course, they're both gone now.
Yeah. But the thing that I want to just elaborate on, I guess is what you want to call it, is that the things that existed then would never exist now. For an example, the way I grew up and like what's in my head is years ago. If I said to my father, for an example, oh, Dad, guess what? Let's just say so-and-so, was in a car accident and they got hit by a car. Instead of saying, well, is he in the hospital or what happened? They'd say, what was the number of the bus, or the plate number, so they could play it. They played the number for everything. If somebody had a baby, before they would say, is it a male or female, they would say, well, what did it weigh? What was the birth date? So you didn't say, oh, congratulations, you had a baby. Was it a boy or a girl? You'd say, what was the weight so I could play it today? What was the birth date? Like if it was, say, today 924, then 924 became your number. Like my number is 426. My birthday is April 26th. We won't say what year because I say I'm ageless. But my father...
You said that. I didn't say it.
Because you tell me my age and I really don't want to know. I'd rather not know. I don't acknowledge it. I don't talk about it.
Do what I do. Give me a hint. Social Security number is 3.
Yeah. My great-grandfather we used to call Boopity Boop, by the way. I remember when he was like, say, 88, he used to lie and say he was 84. Like, what the hell's the difference, 88, 84? If you're going to lie, why would you lie 4 years? It didn't make sense. So, all the stuff that we have, that we're talking about here, in terms of the illegal stuff that then later is why my family all went to jail. Everybody went to jail. It was a family trait that everybody went to jail, was because of the illegal activity that they were involved in. And this article that you're seeing right now, it was the Hanley trial. This is what they used.
Well, he got 2.5 years. He had to serve 2.5 years. I don't know about Barkey because he died at 65, so I lost track.
Yeah, everybody's dead, pretty much.
Yeah, they're all dead.
Yeah,
That's why I'm the last of the Sopranos.
Yeah, he's the last of he can say that he's still around, and he's got his faculties, which is rare. Like he had a stroke.
I'm a stroke
he's
survivor.
a stroke survivor. So, my mother's let's get to that story a little bit.
Here comes the good story.
Her boyfriend, her husband that she wound up marrying, his name was Nicholas Lanzieri. The reason they got to know each other so well is that she was a kind of mistress or whatever you want to call it, girlfriend to Ed Lanzieri, who was a big, high mobster of some kind. Eddie Buff in Brooklyn. They used to meet at a place called Tommaso's, I remember, on Tuesdays in Brooklyn. They said their what the gangsters say for the record. They put everything on record there of what everybody's doing and who's supposed to be paying off what to who. So she was his girlfriend for years.
Well, like I said to you before we went on the air, he was second in command in Bayonne. The crew from Bayonne, John DiGilio
and Johnny Moose.
Johnny Moose,
right?
yeah, Johnny
big.
Moose, yeah.
He was big there. I mean, he was one of the people that ran a strip club that's in Staten Island called Scarlett's. I remember. Yeah. That's how I got to know him years later as an adult in the strip club business, which is all pretty much marble. Almost every strip club, I don't know if anybody knows this, usually is owned by some kind of gangster, mobster person. Yeah. They may have a front of a businessman that they claim owns it as a business or keeps the records or whatever, but it's almost always mob owned or gangster, whatever you want to call them. I mean, I don't say gangster really because it sounds like you kill people. Nobody killed anybody, although they did come with guns a couple of times when I was, growing up. But getting back to the original story, when my mother's father came from Italy, they built this big 3-floor brick house, and the first level was the Italian bread bakery, and back then bread was something people always bought and they always made money. But of the 10 kids, when I went to live in this apartment years later with my one daughter, 2 people, I said, my God, this apartment is so small. How did 12 people live in it? It's a little 2-bedroom apartment. And she said, but in those days, the Italian bread bakery with the brick oven, and they used to have that long, it looks like a giant spatula thing.
Peel.
That's what it's called?
Yeah.
And my Uncle Louis was so fat that they used to bake all night long. Bake the bread, the older ones. Then they had like a truck route, and they would sell it. Then the young ones that were sleeping, which was my mother, my Aunt Stella, and my Clarky, the young ones would get up and go work in the bakery to sell it. The older ones, at that point, had been up all night baking, then delivering, would come back and go to sleep, and they used to sleep in shifts. So the 10 kids shifted their sleeping habits so that some would sleep in the day, some would sleep at night, so they could sleep in this limited amount of beds, this limited amount of space, with no closets. And I said, where'd they keep their clothes? They used to keep their clothes, which I guess was 1 pair of pants and maybe 2 shirts, at the end of the bed, which is hard to believe these days. But years later, when we went to live there, it was baffling to me. Now, I remember when I used to come home, when they baked Italian bread, the whole house smelled of Italian bread. It was so like overwhelming that you had to eat Italian bread. And you could take
5 o'clock in the morning,
a loaf of Italian bread from the oven, and when you take it out of the oven, it's so much different than later on heating up. You could eat a whole loaf of Italian bread with butter all by yourself. And it smelled so much that you couldn't resist it. And if I went downstairs and I knocked on the door and said, Uncle Louie, I want bread. And you'd see him from the back, and he was so fat that you would think he was sitting there, but he was sleeping, sitting up with no back of his chair, like just sitting up. He was so fat that I guess he was so round that it held his body up, like without, having to lean on something. And he, would be sleeping, waiting for the bread to cook, which, good thing, I guess, if we did wake him up. But that's what the family did as a source of income back then. So my mother had to quit school to work in the bakery. I think she went up to 7th grade, so she couldn't spell. She couldn't read, write. She was not too educated.
She was good numbers, though.
And she did, I have to say one thing, though, have a major obsession with me getting a good education because she didn't have one.
She also had a major obsession with wise guys, mob guys.
Yes, well, she developed that,
I'd come home from work 3 o'clock on the railroad every day.
He used to work on the railroad.
She was reading Virginia Hill, and she Bonnie and Clyde.
Well, when she discovered it,
especially with guys like
this is
like
again the documentation of it that proves what we're saying is true. She was exposed to this lifestyle that, with her limited education, she was capable of making money in. I mean, she didn't go to school like today. Everybody goes to college, of course, and has college degrees. Back then, my father went to high school. That was like a degree back then compared to the other
rocket
ones.
Scientist.
Yeah,
compared to them.
He was a scientist. But when she, as a kid, had to quit and then go work in the bakery, that started her limited sources of income. So that's why she got into the illegal thing.
She could use her beauty and her looks to get anything she wanted if somebody had something, which a lot of guys did.
Which she discovered later in life and wasn't aware of it. Like, young girls, a lot of times when they develop, like me, I was in a 28 AAA bra until I was 15. When I hit 15, all of a sudden I went to a 34D. all of a sudden I had all kinds of boys like following me around. I was like, what do they want? I don't understand what they. All of a sudden I have all these boys around me. I didn't know the power of a big chest. And back then I had a big chest when you couldn't go buy a chest at CVS like they do now. And every girl in the strip club has a 38 triple D bra size. Back then, they didn't have breast augmentation like they do now. So me having a big chest, I was 98 pounds with a 34D chest. I used to cause car accidents. My mother used to say, oh, this is a cute little outfit. My mother was the worst when it came to, like using your sexual,
powers.
To your advantage. Like, she didn't ever say, oh, you're young. We don't want people to think you're sexy. She'd say, I bought you this shirt, and it got buttons in it. It had big holes in between. My whole chest showed. She'd say, oh, it's cute. I said, Ma, I don't know. They're crashing, looking at me. No, don't worry. It's cute. And she didn't, like a normal mother, say, oh, well, you don't want that kind of attention. She used to say, though, she had a saying, you're a diamond amongst pebbles. That was her saying, which meant stay a virgin because you don't want men to want you for those bad reasons. I really didn't understand it, but I stayed a virgin much later than all my other friends. And I used to say, Ma, but I don't know if this is a good idea because they have a lot more, boyfriends than me. Like, and they have a lot more attention. You don't want it. You're a diamond amongst pebbles. And she put that in my head, and I believed it.
Look at and you know the story with your mother with Nikki. She was going with the old man.
All right, she went with the father.
She was dating. I'm being
his
nice.
Uncle.
I'm being nice.
All right, yes, she was sleeping with.
She was dating his nephew, who she finally married.
Okay, but this is how it started. Eddie Buff, who was some big, what was he again? Second command something?
Second in command.
Okay.
In Bayonne.
That's not bullshit. I mean, I know that for a fact because I was around when they'd go to the meetings and there was all these gangster guys in Brooklyn. But he lived in Staten Island. Now, Staten Island, the forgotten borough, is considered moving up in the world, people coming from Brooklyn, because Brooklyn is very congested and very closed, buildings and, like you don't get property. Staten Island, you could get a big house with land detached, for the same amount of money. It's extremely inconvenient, extremely expensive and ridiculous. They're not part of the transit system. There's 5 boroughs in New York. New York City, Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island. What's the other one? New York City,
Manhattan?
Bronx, Brooklyn. No, that's New York City. Bronx,
Okay.
Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Staten Island is the only one of the 5 that's not part of the mass transit system, which is trains, which means if you got to get in the city, you hop on a train. If you're not a mass transit person, still, it's not that difficult, and it's, $2 or whatever it is. Staten Island's not part of that. Now, if you want to go mass transit from Staten Island to New York City these days, if you don't take if you don't go by car, which is $13 for the bridge, and another $13 round trip for the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which is extremely convenient, that's $26 in tolls from Staten Island, which is ridiculous. But if you take mass transit, you have to take a cab or car service, which sucks, to the train to the ferry. That's a car, a train, and a boat to go to New York. You're not going to China. In the same state. It makes no sense. I grew up in Jersey City, which was a different state. It was whatever it cost back then, $1, and it was 12 minutes to World Trade Center by train, the PATH train, and 18 minutes to Midtown. So it was extremely much more convenient. But anyway, so Staten Island is where this all went on because Eddie Buff lived in Staten Island, and his nephew, who later, now here's the story. When he died, she totally took care of him when he was dying of cancer, and he had a son, also Eddie Lanzieri. Nicholas Lanzieri was the nephew, who was married, by the way, with kids. She met him.
She was seeing him all along.
Okay, originally. Now,
Yeah,
when Eddie died, the father, and I find this interesting, I remember I was telling my father earlier, there was a problem with, it was so cold out, it was icy and stuff, they couldn't dig in this ground from the ice or whatever in the cemetery, and they couldn't bury him. And they kept his body in the funeral home or whatever for a few days. Now, in those few days where they kept his body, from when he died until before he was buried, actually, his son, Eddie Lanzieri, who was a big mouth, troublemaker, not like his father at all. He didn't have the experience or the background to be qualified for what he was going to take over. Plus, of course, a lot of people owed the father money. Now they would have to be paying it to the son. They killed the son. They shot the son. And they got buried together within that week after his father died.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
They shot him.
Tell him about what your mother did.
With Nikki?
No, she went to Johnny DiGilio,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was deceased. They found him in a body bag in Raritan Bay. He was pretty big too and tough.
Yeah.
She went to him saying